Watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. The US House of Representatives will receive a classified briefing on Iran today, following the Senate's recent briefings on US military actions. The move comes as Congress pushes for greater oversight of the strikes in Iran's nuclear activities. Germany's Chancellor Friedrich Merz calls on Iran to resume talks with the United States and Israel to prevent further escalation. He made the appeal after German Security Cabinet meetings following the recent strikes on Iranian sites. Gaza's Ministry of Health reports at least 72 bodies and 174 wounded arrived at hospitals over the past 24 hours. The figures reflect a worsening humanitarian crisis amid ongoing conflicting strikes. Doctors Without Borders urges an immediate halt to the US and Israel-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, calling it degrading. MSF says the operation forces Palestinians to choose between hunger or danger. An Israeli court has rejected Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's request to postpone his corruption trial hearings. The decision keeps the proceedings on track and intensifies political turmoil amid war pressures. British counter-terrorism police have arrested 4 anti-Israel activists following a protest break-in at a military base. The suspects allegedly sprayed paint on RAF aircraft in an action linked to Palestine action. The European Union urges Israel to address a steep rise in settler violence in the occupied West Bank. EU leaders warn that escalating attacks threaten regional stability and peace prospects. A Russian missile strike on the Dmitropolsk region has killed 3 civilians and injured at least 14, governor says. The attack highlights a new escalation in missile and drone assaults on Ukrainian civilian targets. We start our bulletin with some breaking news coming in. The US Supreme Court has issued a major ruling that significantly limits the power of federal judges to grant nationwide relief. The decision came in response to a legal challenge over President Donald Trump's executive order attempting to restrict birthright citizenship. The court ruled that lower federal judges cannot issue broad injunctions that apply beyond the parties directly involved in a case, a shift that could have wide-ranging implications for future legal challenges to federal policies. The executive order at the center of the case has sparked intense debate over the constitutional guarantees of citizenship for children born in the United States. Critics say today's ruling could make it harder to block federal actions nationwide, while supporters argue it reins in judicial overreach and restores balance between the courts and the executive branch. We're now joined by Spencer Critchley, communication strategist located in California. Spencer, thank you very much for joining us on the program. What's the significance of this Supreme Court ruling? Under the Trump administration, birthright citizenship has been a controversial topic. What are your thoughts on this ruling by the Supreme Court today?
Well, I think you're right to highlight that. There are at least 2 stories here. One of them is President Trump's actual objective, which is to go around the Constitution and end birthright citizenship, meaning that having a child in the United States would not guarantee that that child is an American citizen. The legal wrangling is the means by which he hopes to get there. And I think there actually is a legitimate debate to be had about the extent that local judges at the state level should have in issuing these nationwide injunctions. As much as Republicans are complaining about it now, Democrats were very unhappy about it as well under Biden, and other previous presidents have also had to deal with this. The opposition party will do what's called judge shopping. They'll go looking around the country for a judge who has a record of being friendly towards their beliefs, bring a case before that judge, and that judge will rule and issue a nationwide injunction against whatever it is they want to stop. There was a judge in Texas that the Republicans loved to use during the Biden administration to do exactly this. So as I say, I think there's a legitimate debate to be had about how much power judges at the state level should have to issue nationwide injunctions. And I think I could make an argument on both sides of that. But really, the larger topic here is President Trump wants to end birthright citizenship, which almost everybody agrees would require changing the Constitution. And he doesn't want to bother with that. He wants to be able to just order changes like this.
Yes, Spencer Critchley, thank you very much for your insight on that topic. You are staying with us. We move on now. A highly anticipated classified briefing of Iran is underway today on Capitol Hill as members of the US House of Representatives receive an intelligence update on last weekend's strikes carried out by the Trump administration. The briefing, scheduled for 9 a.m. Eastern Time, follows a closed-door session held on Thursday for senators, where Republicans and Democrats sharply disagreed over how much damage was actually inflicted on Iran's nuclear program. President Donald Trump claimed the strikes, quote, obliterated key elements of Iran's nuclear infrastructure, but so far the administration has not provided new public evidence to support that assertion. The Senate is now preparing to vote on a resolution that would limit the president's ability to carry out future strikes on Iran without congressional approval. Several lawmakers, including from Trump's own party, argue that the White House acted without adequate consultation. The briefing was originally scheduled for earlier this week, but was postponed. Democrats and some Republicans say they want to know exactly what intelligence the president relied on to justify the decision to bomb 3 nuclear sites in Iran. Today's briefing could shape the next phase over the debate over executive war powers and what comes next in Washington's escalating showdown with Tehran. We're once again joined by Spencer Critchley to discuss this in more detail. Spencer, given the muddy communication of the aftermath of these strikes so far, what should we make of President Trump's claim that these strikes obliterated Iran's nuclear sites, especially in absence of this public proof?
Well, this is another example of a division between MAGA world and what we often call the pro-democracy coalition in the United States that is so fundamental it gets to the level of how you define truth, how you define whether we actually know anything. And in MAGA world, under President Trump, truth is always defined subjectively, whereas democracy is based on a tradition of trying to find objective truth and then argue over what the best version of objective truth seems to be based on facts and logic. But in MAGA world, truth is subjective. It's whatever essentially the leader declares it is, and it's whatever his followers want it to be. And statements of truth are more about declaring loyalty to the MAGA vision than they are about making an assertion that would be tested according to underlying facts and logic. So when Trump claims we utterly obliterated the Iranian program, which, you know, so far we have no way of knowing, maybe it happened, maybe it did not, that is this use of subjective truth as a matter of faith and loyalty and commitment, as opposed to having an argument over facts. And this flummoxes Democrats routinely because it's hard for them to imagine living in this world of subjective truths. They're so firmly rooted in the world of objective truth. It's a crucial debate because if we're going to live in a world where truth is entirely subjective, then liberal democracy falls apart and we end up reverting to the Middle Ages, where different nations live under different truths depending on what the leader, the religious and secular leaders of that nation declare the truth to be. And that really is how deep this divide goes.
Yes, and Spencer, moving on, how significant is the Senate's upcoming resolution to limit Trump's war powers? We've seen oppositions from both sides in regards to the president's decision into striking those 3 nuclear sites. Is this just symbolic, or could it change the balance of power here?
I'm pessimistic that it will change the balance of power because both houses of Congress have shown cowardice on this topic, in my view, for decades now. Much as they might complain about presidents arrogating war powers to themselves, Congress has willingly surrendered those powers to presidents because matters of war and peace are so politically risky, and members of Congress have shown themselves, as I say, over decades now, to be unwilling to take that political risk. Now we're at a state where, especially on the Republican side under Trump, they're willing to take almost no risk whatsoever. This is another thing, unfortunately, where democracy is threatened because one of its fundamental principles is threatened. And this is the principle that public servants would have at least some minimal commitment to serving the public. But self-preservation and selfish ambition seem to have become elevated to the level of absolute values for many of our leaders these days.
And Spencer, finally, we've had many of the US's allies urging diplomacy, but also emphasizing that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. What message does today's classified briefing send to US allies in Europe and beyond who have urged caution with Iran?
I think the worst message is, again, this deep controversy over the nature of truth. So to see Republicans and Democrats coming out of the same classified briefing and asserting diametrically opposite versions of basic facts must be disheartening to our allies. In terms of caution, this is also, of course, something that worries people greatly because President Trump is so impulsive and shows so little interest in considering the potentially thousands of factors that would normally influence decisions like this. I think they're probably just gritting their teeth and hoping for the best. It is possible, of course, that all of this ends up working out well, but it's also possible that you'll go to Las Vegas and gamble all your money and get rich. And that's kind of the situation I think that U.S. allies have been finding themselves in over and over again lately.
Spencer Critchley, thank you very much for joining us on the program and for your insight. We move over to the Middle East for our next story, where the human toll in Gaza continues to rise. According to the territory's health ministry, at least 72 Palestinians have been killed and 174 others wounded in the last 24 hours alone, as Israel's military campaign persists. Israeli army spokesman Efi Defrain said on that the military's operation is not yet complete, adding that troops are preparing for a variety of scenarios while maintaining pressure on Hamas targets across the Strip. We're now joined by Adrian Calamel, who's a terrorism scholar located in New York, to discuss this in further detail. Adrian, thank you for joining us. How does Israel justify a military campaign that, according to Gaza's health ministry, has killed over 70 people in just the last 24 hours? The health ministry says that most of these are civilians, if not all. What are your thoughts?
Oh, thank you for having me, Thomas. And my thoughts on the death casualties and tolls are, we just have to wait on those. It's clearly fog of war. I don't trust the source, and really in reporting, you gotta trust. You have three reliable sources to back something up and to be able to make that claim. So just to give you an example, really early on in the war, there was the incident with Ali hospital being hit by an Israeli strike that killed 500 people. Well, it was reduced to 50, and it was an errant Palestinian Islamic Jihad weapon. So these are the kind of things that we need to wait for. And this has been the big problem with this campaign all along, Thomas, is that Israel has two objectives here. One is to get all the hostages back, and two, and this one gets lost in the discussion, is to make sure that Hamas can never launch this type of operation again from Gaza Strip. That's it. So I've never really, we don't see this very often in combat scenarios, in situations where a civilian population is kept there for over a year and a half and moved to different areas in a very small area, which is the combat area. Move them out of the combat zone. And I think that to that end, I think the U.S. and other parties should have been working closer with Egypt to come to some type of resolution, because I think they are probably the most straight down the middle on this issue when you look at all the actors concerned.
Adrian, you did mention that obviously these numbers have come from the Gaza's health ministry, which is Hamas run. But how does one go about navigating the information coming out of this region, given that Israel doesn't allow international press into Gaza? How does one get the correct information? For example, we've had reports of over 400 Palestinians killed around private aid hubs. This was a report filed 4 days ago. How does one prove credibility in a situation like this?
Well, one easy way is to run it through a simple, a decent AI component, and you see what accounts for mortality, regular mortality rates, but then what has happened here. The initial reports are corrected in that, and so you start to get a clearer picture. You're never always going to get a clear image, an exact image of this. And the problem with international reporters and letting them into this area is that, one, if you let them in this area, it's extremely risky, number one. Number two, the ones that have been let in, who have been Al Jazeera reporters, have been off in many cases, and it's been proven, have been working directly with Hamas. So they were reporters by day, and one was actually a sniper by night, if you want to call it that way. So that's the problem with international reporting, and it's a very dangerous area. It's like,
Adrian,
we've all seen the scene.
Adrian, those are obviously reports. There has been reporters are on the front line consistently. Unfortunately, we have ran out of time. Adrian Calamel, thank you very much for joining us on the program. We move on to our next story. Doctors Without Borders is issuing a powerful rebuke to a controversial Gaza relief initiative, calling the Israel and US-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation a, quote, slaughter masquerading as Gaza aid, humanitarian aid, apologies. In a scathing statement on Friday, the medical charity known as the MSF called the immediate dismantling of the GHF, saying it is degrading Palestinians by design and forcing families to choose between starvation and death while seeking aid. MSF says over 500 Palestinians have been killed and nearly 4,000 wounded while trying to reach aid centres run by the foundation, many shot by Israeli forces over alleged violations. The GHF, established last month, operates 4 main distribution points with the support of armed US contractors and Israeli military perimeters. But chaotic scenes have unfolded almost daily, with deadly consequences for civilians, according to reports from the region. Gazan medical teams have reported a sharp surge in gunshot wounds. MSF described the distribution points as barricaded zones surrounded by watchtowers and barbed wire, where arriving early, late, or at all could result in being shot. These are from the this is from a report from the MSF. We now move on to another related development. An Israeli court has denied Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's request to postpone his testimony in an ongoing corruption trial. The Jerusalem District Court ruled that his request lacked sufficient jurisdiction to cancel the hearing scheduled over the next 2 weeks. Netanyahu's lawyer had asked for the delay, citing the need for the Prime Minister to focus on national security following Israel's 12-day conflict with Iran, which ended a ceasefire on June the 24th. Earlier this week, US President Donald Trump publicly called for the cancellation of Netanyahu's trial, labeling it a witch hunt and suggesting Netanyahu should be pardoned immediately. Reportedly, Netanyahu has denied any wrongdoing, and his supporters have described the long-running trial as politically motivated. He and his wife Sarah face charges in 3 separate cases. The first alleges they accepted luxury gifts valued more than $260,000 from billionaires in exchange for political favors. The other two involve accusations that Netanyahu sought favourable media coverage from Israeli news outlets. According to reports, the Israeli Prime Minister has requested several postponements during the trial, citing various conflicts including the Gaza war, fighting in Lebanon, and now the recent Iran-related hostilities. For our next story, we move over to Europe, where 4 people have been arrested in the UK over a break-in at a military airbase linked to pro-Palestinian activism. British counter-terrorism police confirmed that 3 of them, 2 men aged 24 and 36 and a 29-year-old woman, were arrested on suspicion of planning or carrying out acts of terrorism. A 4th, a woman who's 41 years old, was held for allegedly assisting an offender. The incident took place last week at an RAF base in Breeze Norton. According to police, 2 planes were damaged with red paint and crowbars. The activist group Palestine Action released video footage showing one individual spraying paint into a jet engine. The group claims the UK is aiding war crimes in Gaza by supporting Israeli and US military operations. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has called the act disgraceful, and Interior Minister Yvette Cooper announced plans to ban Palestine Action under anti-terror laws. If prescribed, it will become a criminal offence to support the group. Authorities say their actions have caused millions in damages. Palestine Action claims this is a crackdown on non-violent protests against arms flow to Israel. The government is also reviewing security measures at all UK defence sites as tensions grow over the country's role in global conflicts, including its support for Israel's military operations. We stay in the region. The European Union has called on Israel to prevent increasing settler violence in the occupied West Bank and warned that the situation is rapidly worsening. In a statement, the spokesperson for the European External Action Service said that the recent days have witnessed a steep rise in settler violence, intimidation and the destruction of homes and property, including the killing of 3 Palestinians in the village of Kfar Malik. During the June 25th attack in Kfar Malik, a group of Israelis set Palestinians' homes and vehicles on fire. The attackers also opened fire on residents who tried to resist the attack. According to Palestinian data, as a result of the Israeli army and settlers increasing their attacks in East Jerusalem and the West Bank in parallel with Israel's genocidal war in Gaza, at least 1,000 Palestinians have lost their lives and approximately 7,000 have been injured. I apologise for a word I used there previously. It was not needed. The EU is calling on Israel to take concrete action to prevent such violence and to hold perpetrators accountable. EU emphasised the need for all sides to focus on de-escalation, particularly in the current climate of heightened tensions. The statement also reaffirmed the EU's position that Israeli settlements are illegal under international law and remain a significant obstacle to peace. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has once again urged Iran to return to the negotiating table to avoid further escalation in the Middle East. Speaking at a joint press conference in Berlin alongside Austrian Chancellor Christian Stocker, Merz said European leaders are ready to play their part in de-escalating the region. He confirmed that the ongoing Iran-Israel tensions were a key focus during this week's Brussels summit. Merz warned that Tehran's push for nuclear armament has already caused enough harm and that it is time for Iran to come to the table. He stressed that a diplomatic path remains open and that Europe is committed to stabilising the region. Austrian Chancellor Stocker welcomed the recent ceasefire between Iran and Israel, calling it an important first step, but he emphasised that more needs to follow, urging Tehran to continue working with the International Atomic Energy Agency. Stocker warned that shutting down IAEA monitoring mechanisms would only increase global uncertainty and could derail efforts towards a lasting diplomatic solution. We stay in Europe. Germany and Austria are taking a united stance on irregular migration, calling for stronger measures to curb unauthorized movement across Europe's borders. Speaking at a joint press conference in Berlin, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, both countries agreed that Europe must do everything possible to drastically reduce irregular migration. He was joined by Austrian Chancellor Christian Stocker as the two leaders met for bilateral talks. Let's take a listen to both of the leaders.
Wir sind uns einig, dass wir alles tun müssen, um in Europa die irreguläre Migration spürbar abzusenken. Wir brauchen entschlossene Maßnahmen in Brüssel, in der Europäischen Union. Wir haben darüber ausführlich gestern im Rat gesprochen. Ich bin auch sehr dankbar, dass wir das eng abgestimmt haben, was Grenzkontrollen zwischen Deutschland und Österreich betrifft. Das ist insbesondere die gemeinsame Bekämpfung der Schleuserkriminalität. Ich danke dir wirklich sehr herzlich für die enge Zusammenarbeit und ich danke unseren
beschäftigen. Herausforderungen wie die illegale Migration, die Stärkung der Wettbewerbsfähigkeit oder die Sicherheit Europas gehen weit über nationale Grenzen hinaus. Und wir können sie dann am besten lösen, wenn wir dafür eng mit Partnern zusammenarbeiten. Beim Thema Migration kommen Deutschland und Österreich ihrer gemeinsamen Verantwortung nach. Österreich hat sehr lange und intensiv darauf hingewiesen, dass das europäische Asyl- und Migrationssystem aufgrund der Anforderungen, die gestellt sind, nicht mehr entspricht.
The summit included a warm welcome from Stocker with full military honours outside the Chancellery, highlighting the deepening ties between Berlin and Vienna amid shared security concerns. Both chancellors stressed the need for stronger border controls and faster deportation processes, particularly as Europe continues to see a rise in asylum applications and migrant flows from conflict zones. We have some breaking news coming in and two major decisions issued on Friday. The US Supreme Court delivered significant rulings on healthcare and religious rights in schools. First, the court rejected a legal challenge to a critical panel under the Affordable Care Act, safeguarding no-cost preventative care for millions of Americans. The justices ruled that members of the panel, which recommends coverage for screenings like cancer and heart conditions, are inferior officers. That means they don't need to be appointed by the president, as some had argued. The decision upholds the authority of Health and Human Services secretaries, including Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and his predecessors, to select experts who shape the panel's guidelines. Although the case didn't threaten Obamacare as a whole, a ruling against the panel could have disrupted early detection services nationwide. In a separate ruling, the court also sided with a group of religious parents who sought to opt their children out of elementary school classes where LGBT-themed storybooks were read. The justices ruled that parents have the right to remove their children from instruction that they believe violates their faith, strengthening legal protectionism for religious beliefs in public education. US President Trump will later hold a press conference at the White House on the rulings. We stay in the United States once again. California Governor Gavin Newsom is suing Fox News for defamation. He's demanding $787 million in damages after host Jesse Watters claimed Newsom lied about a phone call with President Donald Trump. The lawsuit filed in Delaware accuses Fox of airing a misleadingly edited video of Trump and claiming Newsom lied about the date of their call. Newsom says he last spoke with Trump on June the 7th, but Fox implied it happened later, supporting Trump's version. Newsom's lawyers argue this damaged his credibility with voters and violated California's unfair competition law. They compared the case to Dominion Voting's 2023 defamation suit, which forced Fox to pay nearly the same amount. In a statement, Newsom said if Fox wants to lie on Trump's behalf, it should face the consequences. His legal team says they'll drop the case if Fox retracts the claim and Watters apologizes on air. The suit marks an escalation in Newsom's battle with conservative media and comes amid Trump's own string of defamation cases against major networks. Newsom is suing his personal capacity and says any proceeds will go to anti-Trump causes. His lawyers called Fox's coverage deceptive and blasted Trump's delusionary statements. U.S. Secretary Treasury Scott Bessent has urged Republican lawmakers to drop a controversial tax provision from their sweeping budget bill. The proposal, known as Section 899, would allow President Donald Trump to impose up to 20% tax on foreign investors from countries that apply what Washington deems unfair taxes on U.S. companies. According to reports, the measure has triggered concern on Wall Street. Financial firms and venture capitalists warn it could further destabilize markets already uneasy over Trump's plans to implement steep tariffs on top trading partners. Meanwhile, at the White House, Trump has continued to push for the passage of the legislation. The bill would extend his 2017 tax cuts, expand military and border security spending, and add nearly $3 trillion to the existing $36.2 trillion federal debt. Trump called the legislation the ultimate codification of his agenda. However, Senate Republicans have not yet finalized their version of the bill. A recent ruling by a non-partisan Senate referee said certain healthcare provisions violate legislative rules used to fast-track the bill without Democratic support. Democrats have strongly opposed the bill, calling it a handout to the wealthy and warning of its long-term fiscal impact. Trump, meanwhile, has expressed hope that Congress will finalize the legislation before July the 4th, Independence Day holiday. A major shakeup may be underway at the U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, otherwise known as the ATF. The Department of Government Efficiency, known as DOGE, has deployed staff to the agency to eliminate or rewrite dozens of gun regulations. According to a report, DOGE is working with ATF's General Counsel to cut over 50 rules, initially targeting 47, a nod to President Trump's place in history. This comes as the Trump administration moves to drastically reduce ATF's budget and slash its inspector force. Some Republicans have even called for the agency's full abolition. Attorney General Pam Bondi wants to merge it with the Drug Enforcement Administration. If implemented, these changes would mark a significant win for pro-gun advocates who say the ATF oversteps its bounds. However, gun control supporters warn that the revisions could make it easier for dangerous individuals to access weapons. Potential changes include altering licensing rules, import guidelines, and even job roles inside ATF. All this is expected to be finalized by July the 4th, adding fuel to a growing debate over gun laws in America. Now back over to the ongoing conflict in Europe. A new wave of Russian strikes have plunged parts of southern Ukraine into darkness. Ukrainian officials say a critical energy facility in Kherson Oblast was hit, leaving multiple communities without electricity. Regional Governor Alexander Podyukin called the attack a deliberate move to plunge the region into darkness. Repair crews are working around the clock to restore power, but residents have been warned to prepare for prolonged outages. Kherson has been a frequent target since Ukrainian troops liberated the city in 2022. Meanwhile, at least 3 people were killed and 14 others wounded in a Russian strike on the industrial Dnipropetrovsk region. Moscow is reportedly seeking to gain a foothold there for the first time in the war. In Kharkiv, 1 civilian died and 3 others were injured in fresh attacks. Ukraine also faced a massive overnight barrage. Russia fired 363 drones and 8 missiles. The Air Force claimed to have intercepted most of them. But strikes have still hit a vital airbase in Staroskaya Niv. Russia also claims to have seized 2 new settlements in Donetsk and struck dozens of Ukrainian military sites. Now, in a related development, Russian President Vladimir Putin says Moscow is ready for a new round of peace talks with Ukraine, this time potentially taking place in Istanbul. In comments carried by multiple Russian news agencies, Putin confirmed that Russia is open to a third round of negotiations, but added that the time and venue are still being finalized. Meanwhile, Putin also announced that Russia is prepared to hand over the remains of another 3,000 Ukrainian soldiers to Kyiv, a grim reminder of the human cost of war now in its third year. Russian President Putin has also stated that his government is planning a reduction in defense spending. Russian President Vladimir Putin held bilateral talks with the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, Sheikh Khaled bin Mohammed Al Nahyan, on the sidelines of the Eurasian Economic Forum in Minsk. During their meeting, Putin thanked the Crown Prince for attending the forum and welcomed the signing of a landmark free trade agreement between the United Arab Emirates and the Eurasian Economic Union. The deal, according to the Kremlin, will eliminate up to 85% of tariffs and custom duties on a wide range of goods, a move expected to boost trade between the UAE and member states of the EAEU. Putin also expressed his desire to meet with UAE President Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan in the coming months. He said he hopes to host him in Russia, either in August or during the first ever Russia-Arab League summit, scheduled for October the 15th in Moscow. The Russian leader stressed that he maintains regular contact with the UAE president and looks forward to deepening strategic ties between Moscow and Abu Dhabi. Denmark says it's not losing sleep over US plans for Greenland, but is watching Russia closely. After meeting a top US general ahead of Denmark's Arctic Command, says a US takeover of Greenland is not a concern. Lieutenant General Søren Andersen told Reuters he sleeps great and that the two countries continue to cooperate militarily. The comments followed US President Donald Trump's past suggestions that the US could acquire Greenland even by force. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth didn't rule out the possibility of recent congressional hearing. General Gregory Gouliet of US Northern Command visited Greenland's Pufnik space base last week. His visit coincided with one of Denmark's largest military exercises on the island since the Cold War. Andersen said Russia and China have sent state ships near Greenland before, though none have been seen this year. He stressed the need for deterrence. Denmark has deployed a frigate F-16S and special forces and plans to strengthen its Arctic defense with drones and satellites. The county also pledged over $2 billion for future defense. He said Greenland isn't hard to defend, but stressed the need to be ready if Russia shifts its posture. A royal scandal is shaking Norway. Oslo police have formally charged Mauritius Borg Holby, son of Crown Princess Mette-Marit, with multiple offences, including 3 counts of rape, 4 counts of sexual assault and 2 of bodily harm. Officials say the case involves a double-digit number of alleged victims. The charges follow a months-long investigation that began after Høiby's arrest in 2024. Police say evidence includes text messages, witness testimony and search records. Høiby is accused of vandalism, violating restraining orders, issuing threats and traffic offences. He remains free pending a possible trial but denies wrongdoing in most cases. His lawyer insists he takes the accusations seriously. The palace has refused to comment while the case goes through normal procedures. Høiby, now 28, is not a formal royal and holds no title. He is the son of Mette-Marit from a previous relationship and grew up alongside his royal siblings. Høiby has previously admitted to cocaine use. His father, Boy Morten Borg, served time for drug and violent offences. Prosecutors will now decide whether to move ahead with a full trial, a decision expected in the coming weeks. In a dramatic climax to Sean Diddy Coombs' sex trafficking trial, federal prosecutors wrapped up closing arguments by calling Coombs the leader of a criminal enterprise. They accused him of using his inner circle to buy drugs, bribe officials and organised sex acts. Key witnesses, Cassie Ventura and another woman known as Jane, said they were coerced into participating in 2 hotel nights. Sexual encounters they claimed were recorded and controlled by Coombs. Prosecutors displayed images of 27 men who allegedly had sex with them, framing it as a part of a years-long pattern of coercion. In response, defence attorney Mark and Philo has delivered his final arguments, denying any racketeering conspiracy. He argued that no witnesses identified themselves as part of an enterprise. He portrayed Coombs as a DEI pioneer and successful entrepreneur, building businesses that embrace diversity since the early 90s. Agnifilo claimed the government's case relied on exaggerations, framing Coombs' lifestyle as consensual swinger behaviour. The court has adjourned for the day. Closing arguments resume tomorrow, with deliberations expected to begin shortly after. Coombs has pleaded not guilty and remains in federal custody. We move over to South Asia now, where at least 9 people have died in northern Pakistan after sudden floodwaters swept through the Swat River, catching some children off guard while they were taking photos near water. According to district administrators Shabad Mahboob, their relatives jumped in to save them but were also caught in the strong current which had been swollen by monsoon rains. So far, 9 bodies have been recovered, with 4 people having been rescued alive. 4 others remain missing. According to reports, the family were tourists from another part of Pakistan visiting the popular Swat Valley. More than 80 rescue workers, along with local volunteers, are searching for survivors. The Provincial Disaster Management Authority has now issued an alert, warnings of high flood levels across the region and urging caution. Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has also expressed deep condolences to the family affected. The incident comes during peak tourist season, when tens of thousands travel to the North's mountains and glaciers each year. Well, that is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world. Thank you.